Jack Rowlett is here, the political commentator with Young Voices UK. Jack, good morning.
Good morning.
Prince Andrew's in for some significant scrutiny, and I think lots of it justified this morning. What do you think of the idea that, he should keep an extremely low profile, effectively be out of sight, out of mind over the Christmas period?
I think it's extremely depressing that this odious man is back in the news, and I think it's not really much of a punishment to say, "Oh, you can't be seen walking into church over Christmas." I don't think it has much of an effect. I think if we really want to punish him, what we should be doing is stripping him of his titles. Let's get rid of any status that this man holds whatsoever. I understand it's an awkward position for the king, but I don't think it should be anybody else's problem anymore. Prince Andrew has done enough damage. He has humiliated Britain enough times that he isn't deserving of this status anymore. And I think we should be there should be an act of parliament to remove him of all his titles and privileges.
I mean, that's not going to happen, is it, Jack?
No, of course it's not. But there's a big difference between what should happen and what will happen. I think the bigger story here really is the questions about Chinese infiltration into the British establishment. This isn't the first time we've had a scandal where Chinese spies have been able to ingratiate themselves into the upper echelons of British life. We've had stories of alleged Chinese spies infiltrating Parliament, becoming staff for MPs. It demonstrates why it is so utterly wrong that the British government is going soft on China, welcoming their investment. The Chinese Communist Party is the most evil and murderous organization in the history of humanity. And beyond, global issues where we have to have some cooperation with them, like climate change, we should not be inviting more Chinese money and more Chinese influence into Britain.
This is the challenge, though, isn't it? For the Chancellor and the Prime Minister, who are desperate to achieve some sort of growth, they have come to the conclusion they can't do that without cooperating to a deeper level than they have previously been with China.
Yeah, I think I would point to Europe, countries like Germany, where for a long time they said, well, we can't have good growth if we don't buy Russian gas and we don't have that close relationship with Russia. And then they've ended up with egg on their faces. We could well do so too if China decides to invade Taiwan in the near future, which it may well do. I think at a certain point you have to say we are a liberal democracy, these are our principles, and we're prepared to back them, even if that means slightly lower growth. And I certainly don't think that Chinese money is the only way we can grow the economy. I think it's the lazy option, it's the easy route, in a sense. And the honourable and harder decision would be to say that the Chinese Communist Party is an evil organisation, and we need to stand up to them.
Yeah, there are some Labour MPs who are among those sort of urging caution is the way to put it, in the government's much warmer approach to China after these sort of revelations came out about this alleged spy. Do you think we need to know who this spy is? Do you think the public need to know? It looks likely that at some point this week, an MP, Nigel Farage said he expected a Reform UK MP to sort of attempt to try and name the businessman in the Commons this week using their parliamentary privilege. Do you think that it's important that happens?
Yeah, I think it is important. I think there should be that transparency there. I'm very much hoping that an MP does choose to name the spy in question. For my own curiosity, if nothing else. But yeah, no, I think there is an important issue of transparency there.
Let's talk about hate crimes and listening at home. Whatever you've got to say about Prince Andrew, if you believe as stridently as Jack, let me know this morning. You can WhatsApp me 0333 003 2353. Front page of the paper today, Jack. Police chiefs have called for an overhaul of the recording of non-crime hate incidents, saying it's become an impediment to officers doing their job. We've talked about some of the examples in the past of hate crimes, non-hate crimes that have taken up a significant amount of sort of policing time. And, when you're someone who's been burgled or robbed or mugged, it feels very frustrating that it's sort of tweets that are being investigated instead. Do you think we need to sort of ditch the policy as it currently stands?
Yes, yeah, I do. I think that the whole idea of a non-crime hate incident is utterly ridiculous. That shouldn't exist. They shouldn't be being recorded. They shouldn't be being investigated. If it's a crime, if someone is being harassed, having racist abuse screamed at them in the street, or homophobic abuse or something like that. That is obviously a very different case to, what you described there, where tweets are being investigated, or essentially we've got to the point where some political opinions are essentially tacitly criminalized because you know that you're going to face intimidation from the police if you spread such opinions. Now, I think often the people who are on the receiving end of that are not particularly sympathetic characters, in my view at least, but I certainly am very uncomfortable with the situation we've got now where people are being investigated or visited by police because of things they've said on social media that are just opinions. And I think the National Police Chiefs Council are absolutely right that they should be focused on hate crimes where there is that hostility. That's what matters. That's what creates a really horrible environment for people. And that's what police should be investigating. They should be focusing on real crime. Sometimes that can be hate crime, but often, we're seeing resources taken away from stuff like burglaries and theft, which have been tacitly decriminalized now, just in order to investigate stuff that people have said on Twitter, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, this is the chairman of the College of Policing who said ministers should consider scrapping the practice in its present form, saying, what was important was that it had become a bit of an impediment to what the police were doing, which is ensuring they're preventing harm, identifying where there's risk of harm, and ensuring it can be prevented. So I'm sure this will generate a significant debate today. Look, students and the decisions that they make. There's a very interesting piece in the Times today suggesting there's an interview that they've done with the education philanthropist. This is Sir Peter Lampel, who says students should go to their local university and live with their parents. That would significantly cut down the cost of going to university. Jack, do you think it's a good idea?
No, I don't. And I can tell you that as much as I love my parents, I don't think I would have gone to university if I'd had to live with them for the entire time. I think university isn't just about getting an education. It's about getting to be an adult for the first time. It's about going off into the real world, having new experiences and learning, but in a new context. And I think and a big part of that is living with new people. So I think you take away an enormous part of the university experience if students have to live at home. And even if you're still staying at home, it's still a massive cost. It's still tens of thousands of pounds. The reality is we need fewer people going to university. We have too many going at the moment, and it's pushing down graduate salaries. It's leading to a glut of graduates from low quality courses. But for those that do, a core part of the experience is being away from your parents for the first time. And frankly, given our housing market, enough of them have to come back and live with their parents afterwards. So let's give them 3 years of respite, surely.
Yeah, I think he says the big issue in my mind is kids go away from home. When that happens, you're talking about different numbers. They come up with massive debts. Living away from home is almost as expensive as the tuition. What you're suggesting, Jack, is that the value you get in terms of life experience is worth the cost of that debt that you get into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's not, is there a huge amount of difference between 30 grand's worth of debt and 60 grand's worth of debt when we're talking about the university loan system, where it's tethered to your wages? It's tethered to earnings. So it's essentially the most generous loan you will ever get, even though it's less generous now than it was. And I don't think you can put a price on the experience you get being away from home, really.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that he makes a comparison with sort of European and actually some American cultures where sort of, he says going away from home is very much a UK thing. And, maybe that's the decision that you make to say, I don't want to take on so much debt if I stay at home with my parents instead. I did a master's and I lived with my parents for that time. I was away for most of it. Thankfully, it was kind of one of those masters where it was more like being at school. I think if I did have sort of lectures only on 2 days a week, I would have gone mad. Probably my parents too. There's a really interesting comment piece that got me thinking on my journey on the way in, but by Will Lloyd in the Times today. He says, Starmer is a TV turn-off. he needs to get online. He asked the question, Will, here to say, why does the Prime Minister allow himself to be taken apart by broadcasters when the action has moved elsewhere? In what is a bit of a damning sort of indictment of the TV and the news industry, which is not great when you work on the radio and you love speech radio. He basically says the Prime Minister sort of keeps putting himself up for what is in effect a bit of a flogging by, let's say, that he'll do a morning round with Sky News, BBC Breakfast, Good Morning Britain, Times Radio, and Will Lloyd is suggesting, a Prime Minister with a different personality might say, let's rethink how I address the public, and I don't need to have these sort of dressing down interviews all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with this take is that if Starmer is a wooden performer and he's bad at politics and he's not good at communicating his message, then I think it's eminently possible that he can be wooden online as well as on TV and radio. And I think the problem with just doing online news is that politicians who do so have a tendency to just embrace the echo chamber and only appear on sympathetic, podcasts, to only kind of control their own content on TikTok or what have you. And I think, there are a variety of different TV and radio stations with different perspectives, but there is still that culture of balance and accountability on broadcast media that you don't have online. And I think it's really important that we keep that. And millions of people still get their news from TV and radio. And I think especially in the internet age where there's so much disinformation online, actually people want to come to trusted radio stations, trusted TV stations where they know they can rely on accurate information.
I'm sure people want to do that. But if you are the Prime Minister and you don't perform very well in those interviews, why do you keep doing them? I mean, there's no sort of requirement to do them.
Well, there's no requirement except for the fact that you do have those millions of people going to those news sources, and you're not going to reach them if you abstain from them. I think that's the problem.
Well, one of the things Will Lloyd was suggesting was sort of like Keir Starmer doing live questions from the public, a kind of sort of, in essence, the Labour Party creating a new sort of TV show of their own with Keir Starmer answering the questions. I mean, from my perspective, for balance, it would be awful. But you do think perhaps in years to come, whether it's Keir Starmer who's still Prime Minister or Will Lloyd was suggesting what happens if someone like Wes Streeting takes over. Do you think, there might be a different approach with how government deal with the press?
I think perhaps, but you need a certain type of politician to be able to do that. The thought of a Starmer-fronted Labour TV show makes me shudder. The reason Nigel Farage can go out on TikTok and reach particularly young men is because they like his persona, they like his charisma, they like his kind of brash personality. Starmer is a wooden performer, and he's going to be like that on whatever platform he's talking on.
Yeah, maybe it rests on their personality. Jack, thank you so much. Jack Rowlett, the political commentator, going through the papers with me this morning.